Look, the Chinese Communist Party buys their way into a lot of areas. Sean, there was 37 politicians assassinated in this last presidential campaign in Mexico. And a communist, Scheinbaum, won the election. She took over for AMLO. There is direct correlation of Chinese money going to cartels, whacking politicians. Chinese money organizing logistics flow, moving fentanyl through Mexico. It killed, last year, the headline number is like 109,000. The real number is 300,000 or 400,000 Americans died of fentanyl overdose. That is more than we lost in World War II.
All right, guys, we're fully into the glide path to Christmas, aren't we? I hope you had a good weekend. Erik Prince is here, former CEO of Blackwater. Over the weekend, President Trump suggesting that we should take over Greenland. Why? Why do we want Greenland? Can we take Greenland? What about the Panama Canal, reasserting control after Carter gave it away? Trump saying that, suggesting that as well over the weekend. Erik Prince probably is the best person to tell us if it's possible and if it's a good move. We're going to break down both of those plus so much more with the former CEO of Blackwater coming up just a minute. Before we do that, I want to tell you about one great guy who's not up for any nominations, but he should be. Should be getting some kind of big award. My buddy Leo Grillo, the founder of Delta Rescue. If you go to deltarescue.org, you can see exactly what I'm talking about. This guy, what a guy to celebrate around the holidays. It's cold around in a lot of places, obviously. Florida, it's nice in California, but in a lot of the country, it's really cold. And Leo Grillo has taken in thousands upon thousands upon thousands of animals, dogs, cats, you name it, that are abandoned, abused, malnutritioned. What a great guy this guy is. He started with one dog, and it turned into the largest no-kill sanctuary, not shelter, sanctuary in the world. Man, Leo Grillo has done some amazing work. If you're an animal lover or rescuer of animals, you know what I'm talking about. I mean, look, this is the kind of guy that you want to support, especially during the holidays. So if you're looking for that last-minute gift, or you just want to be a good person and help out Leo Grillo, they don't take government handouts. There's no huge program, no congressional earmark tucked into an omnibus bill of 1,547 pages. Nothing for Leo Grillo there. Just people like me and you. If you can make a donation to Delta Rescue, go to deltarescue.org and think about it. Please help them out. They're such great people. Or go to the estate planning kit. Download it, pray on it, think about it, consider it, because it will sustain itself if we can make it financially viable. If you've got extra stocks, a 401k, whatever it is, just look at it because there might be a tax benefit to you now while you're still living if you make Delta Rescue part of your estate. So please think about that. It'd be such a huge benefit. Go to deltarescue.org to see what I'm talking about. All right. Big conversation with Erik Prince coming up about President Trump's tweets over the weekend about taking over Greenland, taking back the Panama Canal. You have to understand why these are important. This isn't just a truth or a tweet. There's strategic reasons why this makes sense. Not just for us, but in the case of Denmark. Why would they want to give up part of Greenland? Well, he's going to tell us. With the Panama Canal, it's about national security. It's about economic security. It's about Chinese influence. Erik's going to break all this down for us. But there are big issues at stake here. And you see what happens with a lack of leadership that we've had over the past 4 years. These policies, they do us damage. Our military is not as ready. Our enemies understand where we are. We're screwing around with woke policies, DEI policies. The military is not some big social experiment to get right. It's about protecting the country. Threats we face that are growing from China, from over our southern border, from the cartels. We're going to get into all that with Erik Prince. By the way, a big anniversary yesterday. It was 8 years since President Trump named me White House press secretary. I'll never forget that day. Sitting there at Trump Tower, going downstairs, I get lunch, and I come back upstairs. I'm sitting at my desk. There's like 5 people in the office, and he calls me and says, "Put it out." And I'm like, "Put it out." And it was about that release to announce that I was going to be White House press secretary. The world changed for me in an instant. I was honored to serve him and the American people. And I wish the best for Caroline Levitt, Stephen Chung, all the incoming team. A little bit jealous about how this time is going versus 2016, but still very, very honored to have been part of that first team. And anyway, like I said, wish all the best. By the way, the president was out in Arizona over the weekend. What a speech he gave. Let me play you a piece of this showing how different January 20th is going to be in our country's history. Take a look.
And on January 20th, the United States will turn the page forever on 4 long, horrible years of failure, incompetence, national decline, and we will inaugurate a new era of peace, prosperity, and national greatness. It's going to be national greatness. It will be something very, very special. And you could use a little of that because you haven't seen any of it in 4 years. What's happened to our country is so sad. We're going to cut your taxes, end inflation, slash your prices, raise your wages, and bring thousands of factories roaring back to America and right back here to Arizona.
All right, before I bring in Erik Prince, I want to tell you about another great product that makes a great gift. I don't know if you can get it in time, maybe for a New Year's gift or something. But if you are someone like me that has trouble falling asleep and staying asleep, wow, this is a game changer. And look at this. This is an empty bag of Beam Stream Powder. This is the cinnamon cocoa flavor. It's empty for a reason. I crush this stuff every night. 1 scoop in a little bit of water, 8-10 ounces. I don't know. It's a coffee cup. And I put it in the microwave for 30. These days I'm going a little longer because it's colder outside and I want something warm. You put that in 30, 45 seconds. Take it down 30 minutes before you go to bed, and you're out like a light 30 minutes later. When I put my head down on the pillow, it's good night. And I wake up feeling unbelievably refreshed. Here's the thing that's so cool about it. It's all of the stuff that you might have tried. I've tried magnesium, melatonin, reishi, apigen, all that stuff into one amazing. And they've got a brownie flavor, a white peppermint flavor. I mean, the flavors, honest to God, if it did not put you to sleep, you'd drink it all day. But it's that good. Anyway, I'm just telling you, I would try this stuff. You will love it. And if you are interested, you can try Beam's, any of those flavors that I just mentioned. If you go to shopbeam.com and /Spicer. So shopbeam.com /Spicer and use code Spicer for 40% off your order. I would get as many flavors as possible because it depends on what you find, but I love them all. They are so, so good. And you will not be disappointed. This is why so many professionals and athletes use it. Go to shopbeam.com /Spicer, shopbeam.com /Spicer. Use code Spicer for up to 40% off. All right, without further ado, former Navy SEAL, former CEO of Blackwater, and the host of Off Leash, the podcast there with Erik Prince, Mr. Erik Prince. Erik, thanks for joining us. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, Sean. Nice to be here.
Well, thanks for joining us. The president made a little news this weekend. Let's just start with Greenland. He announced that he's going to pick Ken Howry as the ambassador to Denmark, but in doing so, said, hey, I would like to renew my push to take over Greenland. From a strategic standpoint, how important is Greenland to the United States?
It is an enormous amount of mineral potential. It is of significant interest to the Chinese Communist Party. And so I think what Trump had proposed last administration, was effectively a 50-50 rev share where the U.S. would take over the overhead costs because it costs Denmark tens of billions of dollars a year for the policing, security, administration of Greenland. The U.S. would take that on, but then we basically split the revenue of any mining or energy development together with Denmark. I think it's a good deal for Denmark and a good deal for the United States.
But how much of a threat does Denmark view themselves right now as potentially being under attack by the Chinese or under threat from them?
No, but it's the same CCP approach of show up with a lot of money, buy a lot of influence, and create presence forward, literally in our attic. The Canadian government doesn't do nearly as much of effective patrolling of all those waters and areas, and so as a defensive play, and as a good opportunity for the United States to maximize the reach and the economic development in our own hemisphere, it makes perfect sense.
Okay, so if you're Denmark,
And
yeah.
most importantly, there's some fantastic backcountry and helicopter skiing there.
I knew there'd be a silver lining. But I mean, in all honesty, I just can't imagine Denmark saying, oh, yeah, we'll give up 50% or 20% even of our sovereign territory because you guys want it.
They were almost ready to do the deal last time.
Really?
Yes. And because Denmark, I don't believe Denmark doesn't come anywhere near to the 2% they're supposed to be spending on NATO.
Yep.
There's definitely some, and maybe it's just a false flag by the president to make Denmark spend their 2% on NATO. But it's an interesting approach, and I hope he sees it through.
Okay, so we're at the end of the year. Everybody likes to make predictions. If you had to make a prediction whether Denmark agrees to some kind of a deal, where would you put it?
Above 50%.
Holy smokes. I literally thought to myself, this was like calling Justin Trudeau governor. It was a play. I didn't realize that this was really a potential. Okay. This would be interesting.
Remember, think about, they called the purchase of Alaska Seward's Folly, and it turned out to be absolutely a brilliant purchase. I think it came out to 2 or 3 cents per acre in terms of value to the United States. You can imagine where it would be without Alaska. So maybe in 5 years or 10 years, we'll be looking back, where would we be without Greenland?
Right. And I don't disagree with you if we wanted to buy it outright, but I think any kind of power sharing agreement or like it's a stock or a company is very different than owning something outright.
I think it's a best of both worlds. It's effectively a joint venture because right now Denmark bears all the cost of protecting it by themselves. The Chinese have consistently been interested and rather aggressive at pursuing economic development, mining, extractive industries in Greenland. This solves that issue of the U.S. being in the lead on that, and the U.S. taking the lead for all that maritime and airspace protection. And Greenland gets half the upside. That's perfect for them.
Okay. I'm going to change my betting model now. All right. So let me ask you, let's move across the globe closer to home, if you will. Also over the weekend, the president sort of, talked about reasserting the U.S.'s ownership of the Panama Canal. We gave that back during Carter. What is this a play to get lower rates of transit through the Panama Canal? Or do you really think that the U.S. should reassert its authority over the Panama Canal?
It's not a matter of freight rates. It's a matter of the fact is the Chinese Communist Party manages the Panama Canal now. The commercial influence that they bought into in terms of port management, shipping, everything else on both sides of it is a strategic threat to the United States. The U.S. needs to be able to trade freely from East Coast, West Coast with heavy shipping. It's stuff that you're not shipping by rail across the United States, and even be able to move navies from the Atlantic theater to the Pacific theater without having to go all the way around Argentina. The U.S. needs to control or have at least in the hands of a reliable partner. Right now, the Chinese Communist Party is not a reliable partner in effectively managing the Panama Canal. So Trump is right to bring this up.
Okay. And right now they would argue, I think, that it's a Hong Kong entity, but your assertion is that's just the bottom line is the Chinese really control it.
It is definitely controlled by mainland interests. Correct.
Okay. And how much of a threat does that pose to us? I mean, you mentioned the Navy's ability to transit from one theater to another. But basically, what you're telling me in Denmark, what you're telling me at the Panama Canal, is that Chinese interests, obviously even further around the world, mineral rights in Africa, et cetera, we're really sitting back watching them try to dominate the world.
Look, it's not a threat. Panama Canal in Chinese hands is not a threat until it is a threat. Until there's a significant escalation, and then suddenly any U.S. Any U.S. interested vessel is blocked from transiting, or the facilities are destroyed or damaged so that no ships can transit. That is the problem. And two, the management of the canal has been struggling the last few years because there's been a drought, and so they have severe depth limitations, and it's not been kept up very well. So, look, the Chinese Communist Party, with soft money and black bag diplomacy, buys their way into a lot of areas. Sean, there was 37 politicians assassinated in this last presidential campaign in Mexico. And a communist, Scheinbaum, won the election. She took over for AMLO. There is direct correlation of Chinese money going to cartels, whacking politicians. Chinese money organizing logistics flow, moving fentanyl through Mexico. Strategic threat. It killed last year. The headline number is like 109,000. The real number is 300,000 or 400,000 Americans died of fentanyl overdose. That is more than we lost in World War II. We lost a total of 400,000 killed in action in World War II. So losing that in 1 year from fentanyl caused by the Chinese Communist Party, strategic problem. In the South Pacific, a lot of islands that you would have read about from World War II history, the Solomons, Guadalcanal, Inuitak. The Chinese have been black bag and soft money buying their way into these islands and building ports, airfields, and effectively bases in these islands that surround and interfere with the ability to even trade or get to Australia by ship. So there's a lot of what started under the Obama administration incompetence. Remember when they started building all those islands in the South China Sea, basically taking a shallow area of reef, bringing a dredge, filling in, building islands out of what wasn't there, and they just claim it. And then first they said, well, these are just going to be weather stations and for search and rescue. No, they were absolutely built as military bases from the very beginning, and now fully weaponized with radars, with missile systems, the whole thing, effectively floating bases or fixed bases all over the South China Sea. That's the kind of nonsense we have to stop and prevent from coming to our hemisphere as well.
Well, that kind of brings me to my next question. I feel like for the last couple decades, on a bipartisan basis, we've tried to treat China like a friend, like we want to guide them to the right decision. We call them a responsible stakeholder. We think that we're going to negotiate on things like climate change, et cetera. Are we dealing with them appropriately, considering, or are we recognizing the real threat that they pose? I mean, you talk about these now artificial bases that have been created in the South China Sea, what they're doing in the Panama Canal and buying off other governments. I just don't think our politicians fully grasp the depth and breadth of the influence that they are trying to carve out and kind of slowly coming up around us to potentially take us over.
This started in the early 90s when the globalists would have said, if we just make China rich, they're going to become like us. They'll become this club of nations, responsible capitalist country, and they're going to become more free. And this is right after they slaughtered thousands of their people at Tiananmen Square. But that's why the World Trade Agreement or the WTO and all the free trade stuff that was done with China, thinking if we make them rich, they're going to become like us. Instead, they hollowed out Middle America, crushed hundreds, if not thousands, of manufacturing towns in America, and moved all that production to China. And so that, Trump is right to push back on with tariffs, with trade policy, and America first focus on producing here in America and in our hemisphere. The Chinese Communist Party, if you look at Xi's speeches, right? He's the ruler, and he's just made himself really ruler for life because normally rulers are staying for 10 years, and he's now been elected to a third and unlimited term. He really did that with the last party Congress. He literally hauled his predecessor, Hu Jintao, out of the People's Congress meeting as a F you, I'm in charge, to anybody else that was there. And when you read his speeches, he said it is the mission of the Chinese Communist Party to reshape the world, to undo the Westphalian order into the image of the Chinese Communist Party. Now, if we don't believe what they're saying, then and if our leaders don't, then we are truly deluding ourselves.
Well, the CNO, the Chief of Naval Operations, she has a countdown clock to 2027 in her office, right? Seemingly getting us ready for the impending threat. I mean, knowing what you know, traveling around the world, talking to everybody, how credible is a 2027 threat from the Chinese?
Well, if they say it's going to be 2027, it's not going to be 2027, because why would you actually specify when you're going to forcibly invade a country? The best thing that we should do on the Taiwan issue is help Taiwan fortify itself really by a home guard. In a time of maximum precision weaponry, drones, missiles, everything else, where they can deliver by the tens of thousands from mainland China onto any target pre-registered in Taiwan. The one thing they really can't calculate for is a home guard of dispersed and trained people. If you think about the American Revolution, Sean, there was 40% that were pro-crown, the loyalists. There were 30% in the middle that didn't really care. And there was 30% that were pro-freedom, pro-independence. Of the 30% pro-freedom, for independence, 10% of that, or 3% of the American population, fought the British. So if you took a 3% of Taiwan, and that's like 24 million people, 3% of that is 720,000. If you trained and armed almost like a very robust National Guard and gave them caches of weapons stationed all over the country in firehouses, civil defense bunkers, underground caches, it's a very, very difficult math for a Chinese PLA, People's Liberation Army, to calculate how they're going to move quickly through the island and seize it and own it. Because if China is going to move forcefully on Taiwan, they have to be quick. They have to do it in a way that they don't have all the sanctions, because China imports still about 80% of their hydrocarbons and even a significant amount of their food. They cannot afford to have the lockdown as has been done to Russia. So again, calculating that math and making it more difficult for an invasion planner is the way to assure no invasion happens in Taiwan.
All right, let's just play this out, though. Let's say that China does invade Taiwan. From our standpoint, our national security, I know we get a lot of chips and things from Taiwan. How devastating would it be if China did take over Taiwan?
Well, about 90 to 95% of the high-end chips that make our high-tech American economy possible come from Taiwan. So as key to the, in the 70s and the 80s, as key to the energy production in the world as Saudi Arabia was, there's even higher, like 2x the concentration risk for chips in Taiwan right now. So that is a huge strategic bottleneck that we must address.
But if it happened, I mean, just put this into perspective. Does this just shut down our economy? Does this crush us? If it happened tomorrow or by, say, 2027?
There's become significant high-end, from vehicles to personal communications devices, computers, laptops, aircraft, not to mention missiles, large data crunching computer systems comes to a halt. Yes. So that it is a huge bottleneck that we must not let happen.
I know that the Supreme Court is looking to take up this case involving TikTok, which the U.S. intelligence agencies have deemed a national security threat for espionage reasons, for personal data reasons, for other national security reasons. President Trump has sort of indicated that he might not be as willing to ban TikTok as current law prescribes. How just from your perspective as a guy that understands national security probably better than anybody, how much of a threat does TikTok pose to us?
It is a massive managed propaganda platform and data collection platform for the Chinese Communist Party. For a 15-year-old kid, in China, what they would get in their feed from TikTok would be STEM. It would be, science learning, math learning, helping with their homework, etc. And in the United States, it's whatever the fad, social destructive fad stupidity that they can cram in a teenager's head. Not to mention, TikTok collects all the user data of everyone using it and collecting all those preferences and how they communicate and who they communicate with. Again, making it easier to push messaging and nonsense into their mushy little brains.
So it is in our interest either to make sure it's sold off or banned in the US.
I wouldn't say ban. I would say at least have the algorithm controlled by some U.S. or not Chinese Communist Party controlled entity. Because even if it's a Chinese private company in China, there is 100% state control over it.
Yeah.
And it's important to note, the guy who's like Jack Ma, who's a true unicorn in China. He was a high school English teacher.
He's the founder of Alibaba.
Founded Alibaba, which is a combination of Facebook and Amazon and currency trading all in one huge mega platform. And he made one comment critical of the Chinese central bank, and Jack Ma disappeared from public view for 6 months. And when he finally reappeared, he was lecturing at a kindergarten in rural China. And the Chinese state media said that he had embraced supervision in a very Orwellian. So this idea that entrepreneur-led companies in China have any independence is zero.
Okay. I want to move on. One of the things that I read in getting ready for this is that you really, in your background and as a private industry CEO, really look at how the Pentagon does business with, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but basically disgust. Just the idea these guys can't pass an audit, that they don't know what they're doing. As we look at the Pentagon right now, and you have this DOGE effort, there's a balance, I think, that has to get struck between the fact that we don't have a 300 fleet Navy anymore, the fact that we don't have munitions ready to go to protect ourselves because we've been giving them all away, and the idea of rooting out waste, fraud, efficiency, getting efficiencies. How do we address the Pentagon budget-wise to make it more efficient and effective?
You can almost dial the problem of the Pentagon procurement down to the simple fact that who ends up using the goods is not the one that makes the decisions of who and what to buy. So that there's literally a Pentagon procurement bureaucracy that is completely immune from consequences for the bad decisions they make. I would argue, just like more consumer choice that we can put in healthcare, so that an insurance bureaucrat is not deciding what kind of care and who you go to for care. In the same way that we like school choice for parents to be involved in the decision of where their kid goes to school to pick what is best. I would say removing the layers of bureaucracy, the congressionally mandated bureaucracy of this entire purchasing monstrosity, and put it in the hands of the actual troops that are going to use and be responsible for using the tools in battle makes a lot of sense. What's been constructed in the last 80 years since World War II is a labyrinth, a leviathan of almost religious-based rules of procurement that needs to be upended. And then really, if you bring actual choice and an actual competition back to it, we'll have a significantly better result. We used to have 100 major defense contractors, and then the last days of the 90s in the Clinton administration, they almost forcibly consolidated these defense contractors down to 5. And so when you have very, very little competition, even amongst those 5, where they say, well, we're going to bid on this one and you bid on that one, it's really not. It's at most an oligopoly of who can build these systems in the eyes of the Pentagon, and it just rewards all the very worst of behavior. So breaking up those cartel-like companies, and I would adapt procurement. The procurement habits of the automotive industry, not of the government.
So there's a story out in the last 24 hours of this company, Palantir, talking about creating a consortium with people like Elon Musk and his interests to compete against the Boeings, the Raytheons, the Lockheed Martins. That's the kind of stuff that you would seemingly support, saying that this is bringing more competition.
Yeah, and I would even argue less these massive coalitions of bids also becomes an overpriced monstrosity. Let a company bid something and build it, and let them figure out how to put the infrastructure in place for managing the supply chain and the production, and to make it happen. You know, there's a great book called Freedom's Forge, and it's how the American industry was transformed in the early days of World War II. If you think about it, that's really how that was America's major contribution to World War II, was massive industrial might. You know, producing an aircraft carrier a week, a combat aircraft every 6 minutes, just a stunning amount of production. We don't have that kind of industrial base anymore. And so what we are going to make, we have to figure out how to make very cheap, very cost effective, because, you know, there's two things a military commander does. One is coordinate information, and two, release energy. Drive that ship from here to there, fly that airplane, fire that weapon. Our cost of energy of actually delivering weapons onto the foreheads of enemies has gotten so completely out of whack, and it's why our military can't seem to hunt anymore. And you know, it's a sad story yesterday. F-18 shot down, 2 aviators on board, shot down by our own ship.
Friendly
How
fire.
ridiculous. There's nothing friendly about friendly fire.
Right. I want to get to drones in a second, because that's obviously a big thing. But let me just ask you, do you think that the leadership that the President-elect Trump has announced will be effective in achieving some of the goals that you're talking about? Specifically, let's start at the top, Pete Hegseth.
Yeah, I'm really happy with Pete as the choice, as a combat vet who can relate to the troops, who can relate to the frustrations of troops living with really bad decisions made in Washington. I think he will be a spokesman for the rank and file, which needs to be much better represented. We've had the last few secretaries of defense have been, you know, right out of the General Officer Corps, and we have a problem because we have senior officers that don't win anymore, and they don't have enough of a spine or a background to say, this is what we have to do to win, and if you're not going to listen to my advice, then I'm going to resign. I mean, Lloyd Austin, as an officer, as a Secretary of Defense, is an absolute embarrassment to our military.
And is that because it goes back to what you said? I mean, aside from Pete only serving in the Army, which, let's face it, we need more Navy. It's an issue that needs to be addressed, I think. But aside from that, it's having that sense that you're talking about of knowing what works, what the troops need, versus being so far above them that you've lost a connection to them.
You know, we've gone through 20 years of global war on terror, and having someone at the top now that came through the ranks, that understands the nonsense of being over-lawyered, of too many generals, and no one making any decisive, bold leadership decisions to actually defeat the enemy. That's absolutely the change we need. So I was really pleasantly surprised with that choice by President Trump.
Outside of China, what do you see as the major threats facing the United States?
The Chinese Communist Party is clearly our biggest threat. Militant Islam is still a problem, but look, as America is energy independent, we need to focus on controlling our borders and controlling, preventing the massive flow of drugs, illegal drugs, and migrants into our country. The Middle East is going to change because you see a rising Turkey and Erdogan very much behaving like wanting to put an Ottoman Empire together. And he's said it for years. He holds up maps in press conferences where he's showing a greater Turkey that looks a lot more like the Ottoman Empire, including parts of Syria, parts of Iraq, even parts of Bulgaria. So it's It's going to be an interesting ride in the Middle East, but that's not necessarily, the U.S. doesn't have to be involved in every stage of that. The fact that we have 2,000 troops in Syria anymore is dumb. And again, those are just decisions that keep getting made by people that don't have and never had any skin in the game. And that must end. So Lindsey Graham wants to send troops everywhere to be involved. He has never sent any of his sons to battle, nor will he. And that kind of neocon warmongering must be done.
So if we don't stop it, like let's say, and again, I'm just playing devil's advocate here. Like if we allow certain forces to rise and don't play that role, whether it's through NATO or other things, are you concerned that like an emboldened Russia could grow and try to attack, or is that overblown rhetoric from people who just want to send troops places?
I don't think, I think we can make a deal on Ukraine that the Russians could live with, that would, it would bring some kind of balance back to Europe. Look, the Europeans have to step up and defend themselves. The US right now provides 75% of the budget of the actual defensive capability of NATO. So NATO is not an alliance, it's a protectorate. And we should have partners, okay? We should have allies, but no longer should we have protectees. And so Europe has to wake up and rise up and spend money to defend themselves. I mean, what an embarrassment. You have Norway with their sovereign wealth fund published on a website of like almost $1 trillion rising in value, while they're not spending anywhere near 2% of their GDP on defense spending to actually defend themselves. Enough of that.
So Trump has basically said, hey, look, Article 5 is a two-way street, right? We agree if one is attacked, all is attacked. But the other part of that equation is what you're talking about, which is we all agreed that we'd spend 2% of our GDP on our national defense. Most of you countries aren't doing it. That's not the deal. So you don't get the benefits of Article 5 if you're not willing to put into the kitty. What should, and obviously during his first term, he was very effective about getting a lot of these companies. As he gets ready to take office again, what does he need to do with respect to NATO? Threaten to get out of it? Force them to put more in? I mean, what's the answer there?
I think that answer will come clearly after there's at least a ceasefire and a freezing of the lines of what happens in Ukraine, and then NATO can figure out what they're going to do with themselves. Look, the main economy of NATO, main European economy, Germany, it's a disaster. They have like a lost 15 years. Their Green Party, their left, is so ruined, and even their right has been so pathetic. They've imported millions of migrants, culturally not compatible. They've been closing nuclear power plants while they need more energy because they're a slave to some Green New Deal themselves. And so they've literally priced energy and pricing production, right? Germany was always a country that was based on manufacturing, and they've made the cost of manufacturing so high that for the first time in 80 years, major German manufacturers are closing not one and two, but many factories. And so you're going to have societal upheaval, and you're seeing that even in their politics now. Hopefully the AfD gets some sane reforms back and puts Germany back on track, because they are way off track right now. And Germany needs to be strong, and they need to be the center of mass of Europe, and they're really adrift right now.
Let's bring this back home for a second. We have seen massive amounts of drones flying, particularly over northern New Jersey, near the president's summer home at Bedminster, near an arsenal in northern New Jersey. I can't figure out if it's incompetence that the government has, where they can't take these things down or identify them, or they're patently lying to us. I mean, this is the same folks who couldn't figure out that a Chinese spy balloon was floating over our most sensitive national security sites. Where do you, I mean, one, what do you think? And two, if it's incompetence, how hard is it to identify these drones based on your background?
Well, here's the thing. Something similar happened even months ago over Langley Air Force Base in Virginia, which is home to the F-22, the most capable interceptor aircraft in the world. And again, everybody was kind of given the ensign shrug. I don't know what to do. And you know, there's so many parts of the U.S. government that could be flying drones, the chances of them having it uncoordinated and no one knowing is really quite high. I think it's always dangerous to smell conspiracy when it's pretty obvious it should just be slated towards incompetence. And we have a lot of freaking incompetence across our senior and mid-level officials in the U.S. government. Now, for me, if I'm the governor of a state, and after the second night or third night of people saying, hey, we don't know what these drones are, I'm telling my state police with state police aircraft to go fly and intercept that drone, because the drones weren't flying that fast. They're going like 100, 110 knots. So a state police helicopter could chase that down. There's going to be a FLIR, a gimbaled camera on board that sees heat, that you could fly right up on that thing and either intercept it, at least photograph it at close range, or knock it down. I mean, literally
But then what's preventing that?
Well,
I don't get that. Then, like, is it a threat to the helicopter? Could the drone come up and hit a propeller? I mean, why is Phil Murphy, the governor of Connecticut, saying, hey, I'm not doing this? Like, why wouldn't he do it?
Incompetence. And look, there's just there's a lot of, Clausewitz talks about two kinds of courage to win a war. Clausewitz, the Prussian military philosopher, he said, individual soldiers' courage, we have plenty of that in America. The other courage we need is the moral courage of leaders to commit their people to an uncertain outcome. If the governor said to the police commissioner, make it so, I don't want to hear about drones flying over our state again and nobody knows what the hell is going on, I, as the governor and protector of this state, am going to fix that. That's what should happen.
But then, okay, so the governor should do it, but also, I just can't believe that the United States military, I mean, you're a former SEAL. Why isn't there, a special operator team being sent in, an Air Force, a Space Force? Who cares? Send somebody in. But the idea that the military, that you're hearing the Pentagon spokesman say, we don't know, but you're safe, can't be true. You can't, if you don't know what it is, then you can't guarantee my safety. But that's what kind of intrigues me about the incompetence versus lying, because you got to know if you're saying that it's not a threat or you're lying.
You have so many layers of command and areas of authority and intermixing, and no one wants to say, not on my watch am I going to allow this to happen. Nobody has the moral courage to say, this might not be my exact jurisdiction. This might not be, I might not have the 10 layers of approval, but damn it, I'm going to go find out whose drone that is, and we're going to find out when we knock it down. Someone's going to complain, and then we're going to figure out who that belonged to. We don't have that kind of decisive leadership anywhere in the National Command Authority anymore, and that's the gist of what our problem is.
Yeah, well, we will on January 20th. Let me ask you one last question. You mentioned this to some degree when we were talking about Panama and China and the cartels. President Trump has, at least in the past, discussed using the military to take out the cartels in Mexico. One, is that viable? And two, should he do it?
Well, the U.S. has invaded Mexico twice. First in 1845, literally from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli.
Very Marine Corps of you.
But it was an amphibious invasion. They landed at Veracruz. It was a well-done operation. And we also did back in the early 1910s, teens, after chasing after Pancho Villa. Both times were not super effective. I would recommend, this is where Title 50 authority of the agency that can marshal some special operations resources is a much better, lighter, more nuanced approach to doing this, or bounties. Up the bounties on these cartel leadership and sit back and watch the magic happen. You will be surprised at how quickly some of these bad guys go away.
So on the first part, you meant using special forces to go in. Yes.
And go back to the old school U.S. Marshal of this guy wanted dead or alive.
So you're saying we basically put a bounty on people's lives in Mexico, on cartel leaders, and say, go get them.
Yes. Look, it's the same. It would almost be the same as a letter of marque and reprisal. It was actually provided for in the Constitution. 9 out of 10 ships taken in the American Revolution, War of 1812, were taken by private ships, private crews, told by Congress, go get them. And we will pay you a bounty, and this is the license to do so. So again, it doesn't have to be an all government, all the time solution to these kind of national security problems.
I'm sure that would make the new president of Mexico very happy. Erik Prince, thanks for joining us. Appreciate your service to the country. I hope you and your family have a very Merry Christmas and blessed New Year as well.
Same to you, Sean. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in. What a great conversation with Erik. I have a lot of information on the inauguration. This week on Friday, I'm going to put in all the balls that I know about. If you go to SeanSpicer.com, so there's information on tickets, on the balls. I'm just sharing you what I know. I cannot get you in. I cannot get you a ticket, but I'm passing along what I know. I'll also put in the link to the Trump-Vance transition if you're looking for a job. I'm trying to be resourceful. Go to SeanSpicer.com. Sign up. It's free. Always appreciate the VIP members. You can gift it to somebody if you want as well. Last minute Christmas gift. I'm telling you, your options are limited. So anyway, go to SeanSpicer.com. Sign up for the free newsletter. You'll see all the stuff about the inauguration, the transition, etc. Thanks for tuning in. We've got a great show coming your way this week. All week, we're going. Christmas is not going to stop us. We're going to make sure that you've got something to tune into every night at 6. I appreciate you being here. Have a good night. We'll see you back here tomorrow on The Sean Spicer Show. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.